Every child deserves a hero, a parent, a protector, someone to stand between them and the world's darkness. But what happens when the monster you fear most is not a stranger in the shadows, but the person who is meant to keep you safe? In the tragic case of Elisa Izquierdo, the monster wore a mother's face. This is the story of a child who was failed by everyone, a family's love that turned to poison, and a system that chose to look away. In the bustling chaos of New York City, 6-year-old Elisa Izquierdo found her sanctuary in the loving care of her father, Gustavo. Her mother, Awilda Lopez, was a woman who had fallen into the grip of drug addiction. Recognizing Gustavo's devotion and dedication, a court wisely granted him full custody of his daughter. For the next 5 years, Elisa flourished under her father's watchful and loving eye. She was a bright, curious child with a passion for dancing and a smile that could light up a room. Her life, once filled with uncertainty, had found a steady rhythm and a loving home. But this period of peace, this illusion of a perfect family, was a fragile one. The monster that would destroy her wasn't a stranger. It was a person who was given a second chance, a person the court believed had changed. The first sign of trouble appeared in 1994, when a court, swayed by Awilda Lopez's tearful pleas, granted her supervised visitation. Gustavo's heart sank. He knew his ex-wife's history, but the court was determined to believe she had changed. The emotional toll on Elisa was immediate and visible. She began returning from visits with unexplained bruises and a newfound emotional distress. Her teachers and her father became a united front, fighting for her. They filed multiple reports with the Child Welfare Administration detailing the unexplained injuries and her withdrawn behavior. But their pleas were met with an incomprehensible bureaucratic indifference. The system, overworked and under-resourced, failed to connect the dots. In a devastating and inexplicable decision, a court ultimately awarded Awilda full custody of Elisa, believing the mother had proven she was a changed woman. It was a choice that sealed the child's fate and set the stage for a tragedy that would haunt the city for decades. Elisa's final months were a descent into a living hell. She was subjected to unimaginable cruelty by her mother and her new live-in boyfriend. The abuse was systematic and relentless. She was beaten with brooms and her head was slammed against walls. She was locked in a dark room and denied food for days. Her older sister later recounted how Elisa was forced to eat her own feces and was sometimes locked in a closet. Her cries, which neighbors heard but were too afraid to report, went unanswered. On the night of November 22nd, 1995, Elisa's cries went silent forever. She was found dead in her mother's apartment. The autopsy report detailed a horrifying list of injuries: a fractured skull, human bite marks, and bruises in various stages of healing, all evidence of months of long-term abuse. The horrific scene confirmed the worst fears of her father and teachers. The murder of Elisa Izquierdo was not just a crime. It was a devastating indictment of a system that failed to protect her. The public's outrage was immediate and furious. How, they demanded to know, could a child, with so many documented reports of abuse, have fallen through the cracks? Awilda Lopez was arrested and, in a chilling twist, claimed that her daughter was possessed by a demon. But the blame went far beyond her. The Child Welfare Administration itself was put on trial. The very system meant to be Elisa's last line of defense had failed her catastrophically. The city was forced to reckon with its failures. Elisa's murder sparked a massive overhaul of the Child Welfare Administration. The agency was rebranded and given a new mandate. A child's safety must come before all other considerations. Awilda Lopez was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. But for a broken father and a grieving city, true justice would never be served. Elisa Izquierdo's story remains a haunting and essential reminder that the monster is not always a stranger, and that the failure to intervene can be as deadly as the abuse itself. Her tragic death inspired a new movement for child protection, and her name became a symbol for thousands of children who, like her, were failed by the very systems that were created to protect them. Her life and death serve as a painful testament to the truth that silence, indifference, and systemic failure can be just as monstrous as the act of murder itself. Elisa's story is a tragedy of monstrous cruelty, but it's also a story of a child who was failed by the very system created to protect her. Her father fought for her. Her teachers fought for her. The red flags were there, but no one listened until it was too late. It makes you wonder, what happens when the people we trust to be our last hope become the final barrier to our safety? Think about this. If a mother who struggled with addiction was given a second chance, and that chance led to her child's death, who do we ultimately blame? The monster who committed the crime, or the system that handed her the keys? I want to know what you think. Is the ultimate blame on the parent who commits the crime? Or should the child welfare system be held more accountable for ignoring the signs? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Elisa's is just one story. Our journey into the darkness continues. Next, we move from a monster of indifference to a monster haunted by demons. What kind of mother, consumed by a powerful illness, believes she is saving her own children from a fate of damnation? Join us as we unravel the tragic story of Andrea Yates. A mother's love is an instinct, a devotion so powerful it's meant to override all else. But what happens when the very mind that holds that love turns against it? What if the voice telling you to protect your children is the same one that tells you to hurt them? In the tragic case of Andrea Yates, we uncover a story not of a monster, but of a loving mother who lost a battle against a terrifying internal enemy. This is the story of how a mother's devotion was tragically twisted by a devastating mental illness, leading to an act of incomprehensible horror. Her story forces us to ask a question that continues to divide us. When does mental illness absolve a person of guilt, and when is an act so monstrous that nothing can excuse it? To the outside world, Andrea Yates had it all. She was a dedicated registered nurse, a loving wife, and a devoted mother to 5 beautiful children: Noah, John, Paul, Luke, and Mary. She spent her days homeschooling them, teaching them to love and follow the Word of God, a pursuit she believed was her life's calling. The family lived in a quiet suburb of Houston, Texas, a portrait of a happy, devout, and perfect American family. But behind the closed doors of their home, a shadow was growing. This wasn't a monster born of malice or greed. This was a monster born from a place of deep, profound illness. The cracks in Andrea's seemingly perfect life began to show after the birth of her 4th child, Luke. She was diagnosed with postpartum depression and later postpartum psychosis. The once loving mother began to show symptoms of a devastating illness. She became withdrawn, she stopped eating, and she began to harm herself. She talked of the devil and of a higher power telling her to harm her children. Doctors warned her husband, Rusty Yates, and told him not to leave her alone. She was placed on medication and given a clean bill of health, but her condition never truly improved. A loving mother was slowly losing a battle with a devastating mental illness, her pleas for help not fully understood by those around her. On the morning of June 20th, 2001, a day that will forever live in infamy, Andrea Yates' husband left for work. In that quiet, terrifying moment, a loving mother, consumed by a powerful psychosis, committed an act that defied human understanding. One by one, she methodically led her 5 children into the bathroom and drowned them in the bathtub. After the last child was gone, she called the police and her husband, telling them what she had done. When police arrived, they found her soaking wet, her face blank and devoid of emotion, her crime complete. The ensuing trial became a national spectacle and a legal battleground. Prosecutors argued that Andrea Yates knew right from wrong and was therefore guilty of capital murder. They pointed to her call to the police as evidence of her lucidity. The defense, however, presented a starkly different picture. A woman so consumed by her mental illness that she believed she was saving her children from damnation by taking their lives. The jury found her guilty, and she was sentenced to life in prison. But the legal battle was not over. It was later revealed that a crucial piece of testimony from a prosecution witness was false, and the verdict was overturned. In her second trial, with a more complete understanding of her mental state, Andrea Yates was found not guilty by reason of insanity. She was committed to a state mental hospital where she remains to this day. The case of Andrea Yates left an indelible mark on the nation and fundamentally changed the conversation about mental illness, particularly postpartum psychosis. Her tragic story became a stark and necessary lesson, forcing society to acknowledge that a mother's darkest act can sometimes be the result of an illness, not of malice. Her case now serves as a cautionary tale, a painful reminder of the importance of recognizing the signs of mental illness and the desperate need for compassionate, effective care. The tragic story of Andrea Yates forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth: that evil doesn't always have a face. Sometimes, it's an illness that consumes a person's mind, turning a loving act into a horrific tragedy. Her case is a painful lesson that a broken system and a plea for help can be just as deadly as a weapon. The lesson here isn't just about crime. It's a reminder of the unseen battles people fight every day. It teaches us the profound importance of compassion, of recognizing the signs of someone in crisis, and of not judging what we don't understand. Our judgment can often be as blinding as a disease. The truest act of humanity is to reach out and offer help before it's too late. We've seen a mother lost to her mind. But what about a mother who deliberately chooses to destroy? Next, we explore a monster of cold, calculated deception. Join us as we ask, what kind of mother shoots her own children and blames a bushy-haired stranger? The shocking story of Diane Downs. Every parent's nightmare is a stranger in the night, an unknown monster who threatens the lives of your children. But what happens when the mother, the person who tells you the story, is the one who holds the weapon? On a dark Oregon road, a young mother claims a bushy-haired stranger shot her and her 3 kids. She pleads for help, her story flawless. But the truth, just like a bullet, leaves a trail. The strange lack of emotion, the bizarre inconsistencies, and most chilling of all, a child who survived and would eventually tell a story far more terrifying than the one her mother told. This is a case where the monster was a mother, and the only hope for justice lay in the silent accusation of her own daughter. On a warm evening in Springfield, Oregon, on May 19th, 1983, A blood-soaked car screeched to a halt outside an emergency room, and a panicked young mother, Diane Downs, cried out for help. She claimed she had been the victim of a brutal carjacking. Inside the vehicle, a chilling scene awaited first responders. Her 3 children, 8-year-old Christy, 7-year-old Cheryl, and 3-year-old Danny, were covered in blood from gunshot wounds. Downs herself had a wound to her arm. She tearfully claimed a bushy-haired stranger had carjacked her, forced her out of the vehicle, and then, in a brutal, unprovoked attack, shot her and her children before disappearing into the night. Her heart-wrenching plea and her desperate drive to the hospital painted a vivid picture of a mother's trauma. The media and the public immediately rallied around her, clinging to her story with unshakable belief. The initial wave of public sympathy for Diane Downs quickly began to curdle into suspicion. Investigators were struck by her peculiar demeanor. For a mother who had just witnessed her children being gunned down, her lack of genuine emotion was unsettling. She even went on television to give detailed accounts of the crime, speaking with a bizarrely detached, almost proud tone. She seemed to relish the attention. Her story, too, was riddled with inconsistencies. She claimed to have been carjacked on a rural, unlit road with little traffic, a bizarre spot for a random attack. Her description of the assailant, a young man with bushy hair, felt strangely vague and tailored. Most damningly, Downs's behavior in the days following the shooting was shockingly casual. She was seen flirting, laughing, and even discussing getting her hair styled, all while her children fought for their lives. The police had a terrible feeling. They were no longer looking for a kidnapper. They were looking for a killer. The tragic truth was locked in the mind of the sole surviving witness, 8-year-old Christy. Though her sister Cheryl had died from a gunshot wound to the chest, Christy and her brother Danny had miraculously survived. But Christy suffered a stroke that left her unable to speak. She was the key to solving the case, and the detectives' hopes hung on her recovery. With incredible patience, detectives worked with her, using a communication board to help her spell out what happened that night. Bit by bit, with a series of nods and shakes of her head, she spelled out a chilling truth. There was no stranger. The shooter was her mother, Diane Downs. The monster wasn't a shadowy figure in the woods. It was the person they were meant to trust the most. With Christie's testimony, the prosecution had its star witness. The trial was a dramatic showdown between a terrified surviving child and a cold, calculating mother. Prosecutors argued that Downs shot her children in order to be free to pursue an affair with a married man who didn't want the responsibility of raising a family. The evidence mounted. Ballistics proved that a .22 caliber handgun owned by Downs was the murder weapon. Despite her continued lies and a complete lack of remorse, the jury was not swayed. They saw past her carefully constructed lies to the cold, hard facts. She had destroyed her children's lives for her own selfish desires. Diane Downs was found guilty of murder and attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison. Her horrific crime and her subsequent lies left an indelible mark on the public consciousness, standing as a chilling example of a parent's ultimate betrayal. Her story, however, did not end with her sentencing. In 1987, she managed to escape from prison for over a year, once again baffling authorities with her audacity, before she was eventually recaptured. Her escape and her continued refusal to admit guilt only solidified her reputation as one of the most callous killers in modern history. The case of Diane Downs shattered the public's trust and exposed the terrifying truth that evil doesn't always wear a stranger's face. It served as a stark reminder of the fragile nature of innocence and the incredible cruelty of those who are meant to protect it. The story of Diane Downs is a chilling testament to a mother's capacity for cold, calculated evil. It's a case where a child's silent accusation was the only thing that could break through a carefully constructed wall of lies. It shattered our belief that a parent's love is unbreakable and taught us that a monster can hide in plain sight. We've seen a mother who blamed a stranger, but what about a mother who looked a nation in the eye and begged for the return of children she had already killed? Next, we unravel the shocking story of a mother who drowned her own sons and then wept on national television for their safe return. Join us as we explore the tragic case of Susan Smith. A mother's voice, choked with tears, begs for the safe return of her two little boys. A nation watches, heartbroken, as a search begins for a carjacker who drove away with her most precious possessions. But what if the mother's pleas, her every tear, were a performance? What if the monster wasn't a stranger, but the person who made the call? In the tragic case of Susan Smith, we unravel a story of betrayal that captivated a nation. This is not about a crime in the dark, but about a mother's calculated lie, a heartbreaking public performance, and a horrifying truth hidden beneath the still waters of a quiet lake. On a cool October evening in 1994, the small town of Union, South Carolina, was thrust into the national spotlight. A young mother, Susan Smith, stood before the television cameras, her face a mask of distraught desperation. Her two young sons, 3-year-old Michael and 14-month-old Alexander, were missing. With a voice choked with sobs, she recounted a terrifying story. A man, she claimed, had carjacked her at a red light, forcing her out of her car before speeding away with her precious children still inside. Her heart-wrenching pleas instantly turned her into a symbol of maternal anguish. The entire nation watched, their collective hearts breaking for a mother who had just lost everything. For 9 agonizing days, the community and the entire country held their breath. The search for the 2 missing boys and their alleged kidnapper became a national obsession. The town of Union transformed into a hub of frantic activity, with law enforcement, the FBI, and countless volunteers tirelessly searching every road, field, and body of water. Susan Smith remained at the center of the storm, appearing on talk shows and in news conferences, her sorrow seemingly boundless. The nation was convinced of her story, clinging to the hope that 2 innocent children would be brought home safely. As the investigation intensified, the flawless picture of the grieving mother began to fray. Detectives, trained to look for patterns, noticed the subtle inconsistencies in Susan's story. The location of the supposed carjacking didn't make sense, a remote intersection with very little traffic. Her description of the assailant, a young black man, felt strangely tailored to evoke racial prejudice and misdirect the investigation. But most unsettling of all was her demeanor. While she cried on cue for the cameras in private, she was unnervingly calm, even detached. The police had a terrible feeling. They were no longer looking for a kidnapper. They were looking for a killer. The terrible hunch of the investigators was confirmed by a chilling revelation. Susan Smith was confronted with the inconsistencies in her story and finally confessed. She had not been carjacked. She had purposely driven her car to a boat ramp at John D. Long Lake in the middle of the night. With her 2 young sons still strapped helplessly in their car seats, she had released the parking brake and watched as the vehicle rolled silently into the cold, dark water, a crime committed with shocking premeditation and heartlessness. Her motive, when revealed, was even more chilling. She had become involved with a man who did not want a family. In her mind, her children were an obstacle to her happiness. She had chosen her own selfish desires over the lives of her two innocent boys. The mother who had appeared so distraught was, in reality, a cold-blooded killer who had used her children's lives as a bargaining chip. The revelation of Susan Smith's monstrous act sent shockwaves across the nation. The public's initial sympathy was replaced by a tidal wave of disbelief and outrage. The case shattered the idealized image of motherhood and exposed a sinister capacity for deception and violence. Susan Smith was eventually convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. But the true sentence was the irreparable damage to a nation's trust and the haunting memory of 2 innocent boys who were betrayed in the most profound way imaginable. Their story serves as a tragic reminder that the most dangerous monsters are not always strangers, and that the failure to see evil where it exists can have devastating consequences. The story of Susan Smith is a chilling testament to the cold, calculating nature of a mother's betrayal. For 9 agonizing days, she looked a nation in the eye and wept for the safe return of children she had already sent to their deaths. Her crime wasn't just murder. It was a devastating act of public deception that shattered our trust in a mother's grief. A mother's tearful plea for her missing children is something a community is conditioned to believe. But in the case of Susan Smith, it was all a lie. Her deception was a performance on a national stage. We want to know what you think. Does a crime of this nature, where a mother lies so elaborately to the public, make the act more monstrous? Or is it simply a secondary betrayal to the ultimate one? Share your thoughts below. We've seen a mother betray her children for selfish gain. But what happens when that betrayal is rooted not in greed or rage, but in a radical, apocalyptic belief system? Join us as we explore a horrifying story where a mother, convinced her children were zombies, followed a prophet's dark vision to their deaths. This is the tragic case of Lori Vallow Daybell. A mother's love is a child's sanctuary. It's a devotion born of faith and hope. But what happens when that faith is twisted into a monstrous, apocalyptic belief? When a mother is convinced that the children she loves have been replaced by evil spirits, and that their bodies must be destroyed to save their souls. In the terrifying case of Lori Vallow Daybell, we uncover a story where evil was not born of anger or greed, but of a prophet's twisted vision. This is a journey into the heart of a doomsday cult, where a mother, convinced her children were zombies, followed a dark prophecy to their brutal, unimaginable conclusion. To the outside world, Lori Vallow was a woman of faith and a loving mother, her life filled with church activities, family trips, and a warm, inviting smile was a picture of suburban normalcy. Her daughter, Tylee Ryan, was a vibrant, funny teenager with a life full of promise, and her adopted son, Joshua J.J. Vallow, a sweet boy with autism, was her pride and joy. This was a family, this was a home, but the perfect picture you're looking at is a lie. The seeds of a horrific tragedy were sown not in a moment of rage, but in a slow, insidious conversion of belief. The monster that would consume this family didn't burst out of a closet. It was born in the pages of a book written by a man named Chad Daybell. Chad Daybell wasn't a serial killer with a dark past. He was a prophet, or so he claimed. A self-published author who preached about the apocalypse, he and Lori became convinced they were figures destined to lead the world to salvation. Their belief system spiraled into something twisted and dangerous. They believed that people could become zombies, individuals whose souls had been taken over by evil spirits. They were convinced that the only way to save these souls was to kill their host body. As their relationship deepened, so did the darkness. Laurie's husband, Charles Vallow, grew terrified. He filed for divorce, stating in court documents that his wife believed she was a god and had threatened to kill him. Just weeks later, Charles was dead. Laurie's brother, Alex Cox, shot and killed him, claiming self-defense. The authorities for a time believed him. With Charles gone, the path was clear. Laurie and her children moved to Idaho to be with Chad. The children's fate was sealed the moment they stepped into their new life. The first alarm bells rang in November 2019. The authorities, prompted by a concerned family member, performed a welfare check on J.J. Vallow. But the children were gone. Laurie and Chad were vague, evasive, and refused to cooperate. They insisted the children were safe, but provided no proof. The couple then fled to Hawaii, where they were found living a carefree life on a beach, a surreal scene that was at odds with the frantic search for their children. The entire nation was now watching, demanding answers. Where were Tylee and JJ? As the police began to dig, they found a web of lies and a chilling timeline of deception. They learned that the children had not been seen since September. One by one, their friends, teachers, and family were cut off. The police had a terrible feeling. They weren't looking for a missing persons case anymore. They were searching for a crime scene. The investigation led police back to Chad Daybell's property in Idaho. The grounds, a place where children might have played, became the focus of a grim search. Using cell phone data and an unshakable sense of dread, police began to dig. What they found on a warm June day was a horrifying culmination of the lies and betrayals that had defined the case. Buried under a tree in a crude pet cemetery, investigators found the dismembered remains of Tylee Ryan. Just feet away, in a separate grave, they found the remains of J.J. Vallow, his body wrapped in black plastic and bound with duct tape. The children were not missing. They had been murdered. The monsters were not the zombies their parents believed them to be. The monsters were Chad Daybell and Laurie Vallow. The trials of Laurie Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell exposed the full, horrifying truth. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence, including text messages and witness testimony, that proved the couple's apocalyptic beliefs had fueled their crimes. A jury found Laurie Vallow guilty of the murders of her children and of conspiring in the murder of Chad's previous wife. Chad Daybell was later convicted and sentenced to death. The case of the Doomsday Mom and the Prophet is a harrowing reminder of how radical ideology can completely sever the most sacred bond. But it is also a testament to the power of relentless police work and a community's determination to find justice for two innocent children. They were not forgotten. They were not abandoned to the demons their parents saw. They were victims of a monstrous betrayal, and their story will be a cautionary tale for generations to come. The tragic case of Laurie Vallow Daybell is a haunting testament to how a mother's love can be twisted and consumed by a dangerous ideology. Her crimes were not born of simple rage or greed, but of a monstrous, self-serving belief system that turned her children into obstacles to be eliminated. It serves as a stark and terrifying warning of how easily fanaticism can unravel the most sacred bonds. We've seen how a mother's misplaced faith led to unimaginable tragedy. This case forces us to ask a deeply unsettling question. Can an extreme belief ever be an excuse for a monstrous act? Or is the ultimate responsibility always with the person who commits the crime? Share your thoughts below. We've explored the monsters of madness, deception, and cults. For our final episode, we return to the most chilling monster of all, the mother who lies. Next, we unravel a more recent and equally heartbreaking betrayal, where a mother's public plea for her missing child was just the beginning of a grim story that ended with her confession. This is the case of Jayden Spicer. In a digital world where every tragedy is shared, we are conditioned to believe a mother's every tear. When a missing child alert appears on our phones, we share it, we pray, and we believe in the grieving parent. But what if that public plea, that cry for help, is just a performance? What if the mother begging for your help knows exactly where her child is? In the final episode of our series, we unravel the most chilling betrayal of all. This is the tragic story of Jayden Spicer, a little boy who was loved by a community, but allegedly betrayed by his own mother. It is a modern case with a horrific ending and a cold, hard truth. The killer confessed. The nightmare began on a seemingly ordinary morning in a small town in Kentucky. A mother named Felicia Gross made a frantic 911 call to the Kentucky State Police. Her 10-year-old son, Jayden Spicer, was missing. According to Felicia, she had last seen him the night before, tucked into bed in his Sonic the Hedgehog pajamas. When she woke, he was gone. The news spread quickly through the tight-knit community, and a massive search effort was launched. The world was watching, believing they were witnessing a family's desperate race against time. As the days of the search stretched on, the facade of a grieving mother began to crack. Investigators noted subtle inconsistencies in Felicia Gross's story. Her demeanor was unsettlingly calm at times, and her account of Jayden's disappearance didn't quite add up. While the community rallied and volunteers searched tirelessly, a terrible suspicion began to take root in the minds of detectives. They began to question not just what happened to Jayden, but who was responsible. This quiet, growing doubt turned their investigation inward, focusing on the last people who saw Jayden alive, his mother and stepfather. The search for a missing boy came to a horrific end. Under intense questioning, Felicia Gross's story collapsed. The truth was more sinister than anyone had imagined. She confessed. There was no missing person. There was no runaway child. In a cold admission, she revealed that she had given Jayden sleeping medication, and when he suffered a fatal medical emergency, she and her husband, Joshua, had conspired to conceal his body. They had placed the lifeless body of their 10-year-old son into a plastic tote and buried it in a secluded wooded area near the family home. The discovery of Jayden's body brought a week-long search to a tragic conclusion and a community's hope to a devastating halt. The shock of Felicia Gross's confession was a gut punch to everyone who had followed the case. Both she and Joshua Gross were arrested, but the story of Jayden Spicer and his mother's betrayal didn't end there. The community's grief was palpable. In a moving tribute, local first responders organized a special procession to escort Jayden's body to his final resting place, a poignant display of solidarity and sorrow. People across Kentucky wore red and blue, Jayden's favorite colors, to honor a little boy whose life was cut short by the very people who were meant to protect him. In the aftermath of her confession, the legal system moved to hold Felicia Gross and her husband accountable. A grand jury formally indicted both of them, with Felicia facing multiple serious charges, including manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. For the community that had been so cruelly deceived, there was a profound sense of closure, but no relief. Felicia Gross's actions shattered the innocence of a town, and became a brutal reminder of the darkness that can lie beneath a placid surface. The image of a mother making a public plea for a son she had already killed is a haunting testament to the ultimate betrayal. The tragic death of Jayden Spicer will forever serve as a cautionary tale, a grim story that proves that even in the most trusted relationships, a monster can emerge from the shadows. We've reached the end of our journey into the heart of maternal betrayal. We've witnessed the chilling stories of mothers lost to their minds, mothers who lied on a national stage, and mothers whose love was corrupted by a bizarre, apocalyptic faith. Each case has left us with a haunting question. What makes a person capable of such a final, unforgivable betrayal? This series leaves us with a chilling lesson. A mother's love is a powerful force, but when that force is corrupted, the result is a tragedy of unspeakable proportions. The monsters we've met were not driven by simple rage, but by complex and disturbing motives that challenge our very understanding of good and evil. If you want to continue this journey with us and explore more of these unsettling stories, subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's next. Next time, our journey into the darkness continues. We will uncover the stories of mothers who did not kill out of madness or deceit, but through a cold, unforgivable act of neglect. We will witness how a vow to protect can be shattered by a heart of stone and a chilling indifference. Join us for The Monster at Home, Part 2, The Vow of Neglect.